here today to discuss. Thank you. We asked Anita here today to discuss financing for development and to discuss what's been going on with that. She is the chair of the NGO Committee on Financing for Development, so we are happy to have her here. Anita, take it away. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Rosalie. Thank you, Jackie. Good friends. Very happy to be amongst all of you. I also just wanted to share that I think the topic Jackie shared with me was also the intersectionality of social dimensions of financing for development. And so I just wanted to make sure that the presentation, as I share my insights and some thoughts with you, that you really put that in sort of keep that in mind, because this is just not an update on FFD or FFD conference preparation. That's not what I really want to stress. I really want to stress the importance of engaging in an FFD, and why, when we come from NGOs working on the social dimensions of all that is happening in the space at the UN, why FFD, what role does FFD play in this space? Right. Sometimes it can be very technical. And I know Rosalie, because of a strong background in finance, sees that. That's why some of the conversations that you bring in here has a very strong finance focus on it. So without further ado, let me just say that I think I should give you a brief background about the NGO committee. It is one of the 22 substantive committees of the Conference of NGOs based in New York. Our sister committees are the NGO Committee on Status of Women, NGO Committee on Migration, Social Development, and so forth. So we are amongst, and some of you are members of all these different committees. So you see the work, the important role that committees play in New York when it comes to really strengthening advocacy at the UN level. And I personally, I'm very honored to be speaking to the NGO Committee to Stop Trafficking in Persons, because you may not be a Congo committee, but at the same time, you operate at a level of professionalism that I truly appreciate, because we partner as a coalition under the ILO Convention 190. And Jackie is representing this committee on that coalition. And the work we do is, as a coalition, is we are able to do the work because we have these committees that are so strongly focused on the changes that needs to happen at the UN and the advocacy that we need to do. So I just want to say thank you for your professionalism and for the focus that you have when it comes to really addressing issues of trafficking at the UN, and how you try to bring that intersectionality of this topic with other areas as well. And so it's also very humbling for me to present to NGO colleagues. It's always humbling for me, because these are people who show up every day for justice, for dignity, and for those voices that are often silenced. And many of you in this room are just not observers of inequality. You are embedded in communities, navigating its consequences. You work directly with women, indigenous peoples, migrants, youth, and those living in poverty. You know what underfunded schools look like. You know what happens when health systems collapse. You've sat with survivors of trafficking. You've helped families rebuild after climate disasters. These are not abstract stories, but they are reality, our reality as NGOs. And so we just don't see the numbers. We live in the consequences of unjust systems. And that lived knowledge is one of the most powerful contributions we bring to the global financing agenda. And so that's why we must be very clear. Financing for development is just not about raising money. It's not about financing the SDGs. It's about power. It's about justice. It's about choices. It's about voices that are not heard at the UN. And it's about elevating these voices to a level where we are able to be at the same table with member states raising these concerns. It's also about ensuring and really ensuring where the money goes, who makes the decisions, and whether that financing reaches the people most affected. That is a real measure of development. For the NGO Committee on FFD, you will see financing for development tends to be a bit technical. It sits at the global level. It's a macro discussion on debt, trade. But at the end of it, all we need to really worry about is How is it that those resources, after all these global policy discussions, are they translating to people on the ground? So it's about transparency, it's about accountability, and above all, it's about shifting power from the boardrooms and backrooms to people on the front lines. So we have a very important role to play in the FFD discussions. And too often we see a world where wealth continues to accumulate in the hands of a few, while the most vulnerable, those without formal addresses, without bank accounts, without a seat at the table, are consistently left behind. And so let's call for what it is. Not a funding gap, but it's a justice gap. And so that's where NGOs come in, because we stand for justice, we stand for rights. And so it's a justice gap, and that we need to address. And so as we look to the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development, we must not treat this as business as usual. This is a pivotal point in advancing the SDGs, in how money is managed, in how policy decisions gets translated to the government, to the ground on all aspects, whether it's social, whether it's financial, whether it's relating to pertaining to gender. It's how financing is going to sort of dictate the terms, right? And how it is going to translate to the ground. So it's just simply not a moment for review. It's a pivotal opportunity, responsibility to demand transformation. So let's be honest, the landscape we are operating in is not only shaped by financial policy, it's increasingly shaped by geopolitical tensions. And as all of you know, what's happening in the United States, across the globe, and it's really shaking the very foundation of multilateralism, right? And I'm sure you're seeing it in the space of the work that you do, the shrinking civil society space. It's all interlinked. It's just, and we as NGOs, the importance of our role as advocates is to make sure that we do not operate in silos. So I'm very thankful to Jackie and Rosalie for thinking it's important to bring an FFD consideration into some of the conversations that you are having. Um, and so global conflicts, militarization, fractured international cooperation have all stalled progress on climate finance, fragmented supply chains, driven up food and energy prices, and drained already scarce public budgets. So, while the arms budget continues to balloon, development budgets continue to shrink. We are talking about ODI, the official development assistance that countries get. They are all getting cut, right? When countries are facing austerity, when most of their resources are being allocated towards paying debt, how are they supposed to ensure social protection for their citizens? So we need to make sure we sort of think outside the box. And you coming from a trafficking perspective, you're engaging with member states at the UN at a very different level. But take a closer look at how money is being managed, right? And social protection is a crucial aspect for anybody in the space, any individual who's living in a marginalized community, whether it's for education, whether it's for healthcare. Social protection is crucial for children's education. So make sure that the governments that you're speaking to, that you ask this important question: how is debt impacting their social protection measures? How is it translating to budgeting for social protection? And so there's a crucial role we can play looking at finances, how it's being allocated, and how is the challenges that governments are facing when in a shrinking financing space. When it comes to, it's not only the SDGs, it's about when you talk about a developed country that is facing challenging economic situations, it's choosing not to provide funding for any of that funded in the past when it comes to social programs. And how is that translating to that developing country when it comes to providing resources for the schools, the hospitals, and so forth? So financing for development, it's just not about a macro discussion. It's about how money translates to the ground, right? And so let's keep that in mind. And while some countries are able to secure favorable lending, if you are a developed country, you have a certain credit rating at the global level, and you're able to raise resources. But as a developing country that is already challenged with in an overwhelmingly debt challenge situation, its credit rating is impacted, and how is it going to raise resources in this current space? And that we have to be very cognizant of that. And we really need to be partners with those countries. So when, it's important to be partnering with developed countries, but it's also important, and I think your committee already does that, making sure you hear the developed voice, the developing voice, the grassroots voice, the private sector voice. And so long as you have all partners at the table, it's a lot easier to have this intersectional conversation rather than just limiting to funders, but also, funding recipients, right? And so it's very important to do that. So, and especially in the face of interest rates soaring, when most of the loans that countries have taken are pegged to the US dollar, every time the exchange rate is not favorable, the amount of money they owe go up as well, right? And so what can be done to ensure that these developing countries have a, a better balance in the way that they're going to manage their financing? So this is finance. That's why financing for development is this conference is going to be very, very critical, because debt is a crucial, going to be a crucial discussion. I was in Monterey recently this is a conference that happens on an annual basis. It's actually a Chatham House, governed discussion where, as you know, no names are revealed. Many of the major discussions are not revealed, but I can just share that the major concerns coming from developing countries was the debt situation, right? How is that going to be addressed? They're willing to generate the domestic resources needed to address many of the challenges. But when in a space of illicit financial flows, when in a space where they are paying their priorities to pay debt and not to provide social protection to their constituents, how are they going to come out of all this on an equal playing ground with developed countries who are already at a much higher level of advantage when it comes to securing loans, the interest rates that are given to them, their credit rating, and so forth? So how can we have a level playing field, as the SDGs are not going to be accomplished if there is no level playing field, right? And as civil society organizations, we have to be very conscious about this. We have to watch this space to see how money is translating to the ground. There's also the issue of corruption, right? And it's just simply not about allocating resources. It's about how is money managed once it reaches the government. I've had experience of, I don't want to mention governments, but money gets to the capital, money doesn't get to the ground because it goes into the pocket of certain individuals at the government level. So how can we as civil society organizations really monitor that? And you will see that the FfD, currently the FfD conference, in preparation for the conference, intense processes are happening at the UN. I'll share a slide later just to show you some of the discussions that are happening, just for you to be observing it and also taking a look at the outcome document that's going to be coming out, because it's going to have processes in place to recommend how some of these allocation of resources can be monitored. And so maybe this is something that we as civil society, as a collective, should discuss, even though you are not engaging on FfD directly. But how can we as civil society really monitor financing on the ground? How is it getting to people on the ground? How is it making a change in the lives of an individual who's already in a situation challenged by climate disasters, who's already facing, an existential crisis, essentially, right? When it comes to having to leave the communities they live in, not having resources to go to a decent school, or not having a decent an education system that will allow them to survive in a space where artificial intelligence is taking over much of the jobs they have, right? And so what can we do as civil society organizations to provide this level playing ground? And the most vulnerable communities face, as I already shared, highest price for geopolitical instability. Refugees fleeing wars, women facing increased gender-based violence in conflict zones, indigenous territories, when they're militarized and exploited without consent. These are all side effects of this current geopolitical tensions that we are seeing. And so we must be brave enough to say financing for development cannot exist in a vacuum. If global leaders are serious about development, they must also be serious about diplomacy, about peace building, and about equitable multilateral governance. We must call for a global financial architecture that that provides equal voices for developed and developing countries. Currently, if you look at the IMF World Bank situation, when you look at who is on the board, it's the developed countries, right? And there needs to be a balance of voices. If the decisions are going to be about how financing is going to be allocated to developing countries, then they need to be at the table. And those voices are equally important. We must expose the empty climate pledges. While communities are drowning in floods or flee from droughtful wildfires, we must challenge development finance structures that reward private investors while leaving public institutions to absorb all the risk. You must have heard about, I don't know how often it happens in the trafficking space when you talk about blended financing initiative. Private partnership, public partnership, they come together to finance certain initiatives at the country level. And many times the private sector is in it because there is a return on investment component. The moment they realize there is not a return on investment for the investment they have made, they leave that space. And the public sector is left to foot the bill of whatever consequences happen. So if the private sector comes into a space, we must hold them accountable to deliver on the commitments they have made, right? And so public and private, such opportunities must serve people, just not profits. We must remember that finance is not neutral. It reflects priorities, it reflects values. And if we are not part of shaping those values, then others will decide for us, often at our own expense. And I was very impressed with the partnership you had, Rosalie, with that event that you organized with LISEG, with the CSTIP. Very important, right? That you are at that level talking about an issue that not many people will be able to have a conversation about. So you're already at that space. You're already engaging with these agencies at the highest level. So bring some of these considerations into that. You've already opened the door. So bring some of these considerations into those conversations. When we also talk about climate resilience, digital inclusion, sovereign debt relief, or social protection, we must always ask who's benefiting, who is being bypassed, whose voice is missing from the room. And if we see, and if we have an open avenue to a member state, bring it up. You must be doing it as part of your mission visits. In these mission visits, ask tough questions. The NGO committee will be organizing its mission visits in the coming weeks in preparation for the FfD, a forum that's going to happen in April, and then the conference happening in July. And we already have and I'm thinking you also have that, we have a very clear advocacy priority sheet that we have. We have a two-pager which talks about advocacy priorities from our three priority areas, which is climate finance, social protection, and financial and digital inclusion. And then we provide on the second page, we provide rationale, and I'm happy to share that with you, Rosalie and Jackie and Kimberly, if that would be helpful, because it will help you really get to that room already prepared to have a conversation with the member states. You're well versed in it, so I'm not going to advise you on how we do this. We learned it from other NGO committees, like the NGO Committee on Migration, who has had it for many, many years, this process of engaging with member states. And we picked up from that, and we have perfected the art of engaging with member states in the sense that we have this in-person breakfast consultation. We build a network at that in-person breakfast consultation. Then we reach out to them with the report. Then we provide them our advocacy priorities. So it's a dance that we play all throughout the year, and we have to do that to get member states engaged in the work that we do. Just simply approaching them has not helped us in the past. So we try to be much more intentional in the way we approach. So, and so that's why I'm saying we must go even deeper. Because these issues that we are talking about don't just exist in isolation, they intersect, and intersectionality is not just a buzzword. It is a necessity in analysis and advocacy. We should understand how the work that this committee does intersects with some of the work that the Financing for Development Committee might do, the Migration Committee might do, right? Then that's a strength in if you can sort of highlight some of the key concerns that we are raising in the mission visits that we do, and we can do the same for you, right? And so we bring your key concerns because why do we have to duplicate the efforts? If we are already partners in ILOC 190, we should be able to strengthen our capacity in other areas as well. And just because I'm speaking to the NGO committee to stop trafficking in persons, just wanted to talk about the issue of trafficking in persons. It's often framed as a security or law enforcement issue, but At its root, trafficking is a financing and economic justice issue. It thrives in places where poverty is entrenched, where gender inequality is normalized, where displacement is rising, and where public systems are underfunded or non-existent. When girls are pulled from school because families can't afford tuition, when women flee violence without access to safe shelter or legal aid, when informal workers lack protections, these are the fault lines traffickers exploit. And so, if we are not financing education, social protection, housing, and justice systems, we are not ensuring that economic alternatives are available, then we are by default financing the conditions that allow exploitations to flourish. And that's why financing for development must go beyond numbers and technicalities. It must be grounded in intersectionality, equity, and lived realities of those most impacted. And it's a struggle because sometimes, because the NGO committee, most of the work we do on financing for development is coming from the macro to the micro perspective. Many times you will hear that people are interested, the NGOs who are engaged at the highest level in FFD are interested speaking about the macro aspects. They really don't want to talk, they're not in the communities providing service. And that's the advantage that the NGOs who engage in this group does, the NGOs who engage in the NGO committee on FFD has, because we have NGOs who provide direct services on the ground. And we see how inefficiency in translation of financing to the ground actually plays out in people's life. So, let's be close monitors of that. We cannot afford another global convening, which is the FFD conference that's going to be happening in Sevilla, in Spain, where outcomes are watered down to the lowest common denominator. We need bold commitments, but we also need structural reform. Because the systems we are working currently are broken. They are working exactly as they are designed to work in, to extract, to exclude, and to concentrate power. So our role as civil society is reimagine and build these systems, not for markets, but for people and the planet. And so this means standing firmly against austerity measures, as many of you must be already. I mean, as I already shared, when a country is constrained by debt, what does it do? It adopts austerity measures. So social protection funding gets constrained, right? We must stand against, we learned from COVID that when resources don't get to people, that is the most challenging situation for them to come out of that, such a disastrous situation. So social protection measures must continue. The NGO committee in FFD has a strong focus on financial inclusion and digital inclusion. What we learned during COVID is that we did a survey in, I think, 7 developing countries. What we learned was that the countries that already had strong digital infrastructure, who provided financial literacy training, digital literacy training to their citizens, were much better placed to provide cash transfers to people living in marginalized communities, right? The countries that didn't invest in any of those did not have a mechanism to provide cash transfers. So we have to look at it from many different angles. If we are talking about women who are trafficked or women who are in refugee communities, how do we ensure that they get the resources in disastrous situations? And so the country must invest in digital public infrastructure that really delivers on when it is required to do. Right. And lastly, it also means about financing for development means about reclaiming the narratives of what development looks like. It's just not about GDP growth. It's the number of girls in school. It's access to clean water. It is when a single mother can feed a family and live free from violence. These are all real indicators of progress. But sometimes we tend to operate in silos and we forget the intersectionality of these multiple uh, all these aspects when it comes to ensuring a productive economy, a meaningful economy for people who are its citizens. And so there's a lot. It's a tall action for us as NGOs, but in our networks, in our organizing, we must not be silent. So it's important to engage in the FFD processes. The NGO committee on FFD will be organizing an orientation session on the 15th of April. I will share that with Jackie and Rosalie and Kimberly. And so if you could just make sure that people are at these sessions to understand, it'll be more. It's almost like a primer for the FFD processes. So it's not going to be at the highest technical level. It's about why it's important to get engaged in these discussions, right? And so I shall share some of these. And I just want to share a slide. I have one slide that I would like to share so that I can just let you know what some of the, hopefully if I can work on it. Let me see if it works. Let me just share this one slide. Yeah, okay. So can you see my screen? I'm just going to see if I can. Uh, yeah, I should be doing a slideshow, but let me see. Are you able to see my slide? Rosalie?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I just want to just give you an overview of how this process is currently shaping up. Right now, there is something, the first intersessional consultations are happening. Uh, the zero draft was published sometime in February. The zero draft of the outcome document was published sometime in February. Now, a first draft was published in March. Right now, governments are going through a line by line negotiation on this on the first draft that has come out, and I'm happy to share the first draft with you by email. I can share it with Rosalie and Jackie, and then I hope all of you can take a look at it. Now, these intersessional discussions are happening in conference room 3 at the UN. You, as civil society organizations, if you have an ECOSOC badge, you can sit in. You can just be in the balcony and just listen and just watch as to how governments are negotiating. So that's where right now the negotiations are happening. Civil society organizations really fought to make sure that we can sit as observers. Normally, this is a closed door discussion, but we can sit in and listen to some of the conversations. And you can also see, so there might be some governments that you're extremely friendly with, and you can see how these governments are engaging on these discussions, and maybe it'll give you an opportunity for you to talk about it when you meet them in person. The FfD forum, normally the FfD forum happens every year in April. And so this year again, it will happen on 28th through 29th of April. And then the fourth PrepCom. We've had 3 PrepComs in preparation for the FfD conference. And so the fourth PrepCom is going to happen from 30th April to May 1st. And they have opportunity for side events. That the deadline to request side events are very already passed. It was sometime in March. So the NGO community and FfD will be organizing, as we've submitted a request. We are hoping that we get approved. Our topic will be on AI, artificial intelligence in the space of official development assistance, debt infrastructure, the current debt challenge, and so forth, and how can artificial intelligence, AI tools be better used to address some of the concerns that we're talking about, but also looking at the others, the flip side of AI, because of all ethical concerns and so forth. So that's what we have proposed. So this will be the fourth PrepCom that happens, and out right after that will be the second intersessional consultation. It's again, the governments are going to, member states are going to be looking at the outcome document again. They're going to have an open conversation and negotiations at that point. And then there's the third, intersessional consultation. And then a second part of the fourth preparatory meeting will happen sometime in mid-June. Dates are not confirmed. And then the Sevilla platform for action. There's already up on the, and I can share this slide with you because all these are hyperlinked. So you can just simply go into the website and check the FfD website and check what, if you want to learn more about each of these initiatives. There's also an open call for side events, in-person side events. There are more opportunities for side events at Sevilla. So that deadline is 18th April, and then they have virtual opportunities. So, if you are interested in organizing a virtual side event, that might be, I think that in-person is going to be very, very difficult because to request a space, it will be mostly governments and most probably NGOs who are very heavily already engaged in the process, but maybe there is possibility for a virtual side event. But let me know if there is an interest to request a side event, and I'm more than happy to engage with you on that. And so I can just stop this and I can share the slide with you so you can have a little bit of information at your fingertips if you want to see how this process is going to work. I'll stop there. I was just sharing with Rosalie that I'm more interested in I'm also interested in informal conversation, just to hear how you see the intersectionality of the work that you do with financing for development, and how can we strengthen some of these collaborations. I'll stop there then.
Thank you, Anita, for that wonderful presentation. In regards to your question, I'm sure Rosalie would be happy to answer it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anita, as always, what an incredible presentation. And you will be sure that we will be sure to submit the attachments that you talked about to our distribution. A couple of areas I want to engage on. You briefly mentioned corruption. And the issue of corruption, impunity, and human trafficking go hand in hand. Before you came onto the call, we were discussing various issues where government representatives have their own, basically, trafficking rings. In both, we mentioned Saudi Arabia and Kenya, especially women going into the informal workplace as maids, and being sent overseas and then getting caught up by these organizations that are running employment agencies, dubbing as trafficking rings. So when you talk about financing and you talk about the money getting from the government to the issues, to the people, that is certainly a major area that we need to further partnership on, I believe, and we can further partnership. I see Madeline is still on the call. I don't have the view of, should see if I can get the gallery. Yeah. Madeline, you're still on the call, and I think that the League of Women Voters, within a reach of more than 700,000 people, is an important piece to consider. You know, some of us represent some very big organizations, including faith-based groups. And these are areas where I think if we could expand our reporting to, it would help the public understand some of these issues and how it impacts them. In the United States, and I think everybody here is based in the United States, we had a major event Saturday where people mobilized and showed up to protest the cuts that are being made by the US government at this point. And millions showed up. It had an impact. It has an impact. It has an impact to politicians that are running for re-election and control the finances. And we need to understand that intersectionality, if you will, of how our organizations, each with a different focus, can bring to bear solutions and focus on the solutions. In the UN, we hear a lot about problems. Boy, the problems go on and on and on and on. But very rarely do we hear about solutions. And that's where we need to focus our efforts, and we need to provide measurable results so that governments listen and governments want to invest further in action. Because otherwise they're just throwing away our money, and it's our money. Let's remember the government's money isn't coming from other politicians. It's coming, or the biggest industries, it's coming from us, the people. We pay for all this. We pay for the UN, we pay for the government at the local, county, state, and national levels. And it's time we say enough is enough. So that's my speech for now. Sorry.
Thank you, Rosalie, for that insight. I also wanted to share that the FFD process is a little bit different from the many normal processes that we see at the UN. I had shared with Jackie that when the prep comms happen, NGOs, civil society organizations, and governments are kept on equal footing when it comes to providing interventions, right? We're not cut off at the microphone. We can share our interventions in a very inclusive manner. So FFD is it has a different way of engaging with civil society organizations, and we need to make sure that safe space is maintained for civil society. You talked about the corruption aspect. It's very important to highlight that. You also talked about solutions. One of the key components in preparation for the FFD conference, I think I shared it in my slide already, is that platform they're talking about, where you can propose solutions. They're more interested in hearing solutions than about problems at this point. And the member states who are coordinating, one of them is Mexico. There are, I mean, the co-facilitators of the outcome document, Mexico, Nepal, Zambia, and Norway. And if you have strong relationship with any of those governments, have you highlight this in your conversations and try to take a look at the platform they have proposed for the conference itself and see if there are solutions that you're proposing and something that has worked very effectively in your space. I think that partnership with LSEG would be a great example of a solution that you can propose, right? The partnerships that happen where how money is getting transferred is being tracked through a financing mechanism, and that needs to be replicated.
We just was sharing a podcast that was done with Santander Bank and Theta Ray, which is another AI company, and how those working together, they uncovered a sex trafficking ring by following the money and the AI generation of insights to who the perpetrators were. And
yes.
brought down a sex trafficking ring. Those are the kinds of things we want to see and that we should be sharing. We have that platform as civil society to make that happen. I also want to caution, though, Anita, you say that you have that platform, civil society has that platform in FFD. One of the reasons civil society has that platform is because they have credible contributions to make to that group of people. And it's not just going into a member state's mission and talking about the weather. It's not just social aspects. It is focusing on the solutions and the expertise that you bring to the table about a particular topic. Anita does that better than anybody I've ever met.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely does. And that's the kind of credibility we need to develop in order to have the impact with the member states.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions for me or comments? And Rosalie, I also wanted to share that I will share the first draft of the outcome document. The NGO Committee on FFD is going to provide a written input to that, to the first draft. So if you can take a look at it and let me know where you see some language on trafficking and corruption can go in, because we should not be doing that. That's not our expertise, but specific to trafficking, if you can put that language in, we are happy to submit that as part of our submission on input to the first draft.
Good.
Jackie, please.
Thank you, Anita. I mean, my head is spinning with all the great ideas that we need to partner on and, move forward on. I was thinking about how wonderful it would be if we could have a virtual side event with our partners from South Africa in Seville, but I don't know if we have a capacity to do that. I want to ask you a sort of odd question. Is that even though you're trying to focus on the positive and the long range, I mean, there has to be some kind of concern right now about the tariffs and the possibility of worldwide recession, and this has to play into I mean, I would assume it has to play into conversations about, moving money, investing money around the world. I just, is that part of what's going on right now since it's so current?
Yes, it is. It's a major concern. If you sit through some of the meetings, you will hear that. But I'm also very encouraged by the way the government of Spain is leading the effort. They're very confident that this meeting needs to happen for governments to come together and have a conversation. And just because, I mean, these concerns are, I mean, it's sort of eating all of us up, right? When you think about the conversations that are happening on tariffs, on immigration, on migration, all that. But at the same time, governments have to keep moving forward. And I'm very encouraged by the co-facilitators, the co-chairs, it's Portugal and Burundi are the co-chairs, and how these governments are they can already drop the ball and say that we are so challenged, we don't have, but they're not doing that. The conversations in Monterey was very encouraging. The conversations that are happening in New York, it's very encouraging. So, but they have to keep the conversations going forward, right? If they drop the ball on us right now, there's not going to be an outcome that's going to be beneficial to anybody. You raise an important concern, Jackie, but this needs to happen for the next step. Whatever solutions we can propose, this needs to happen. You also talk about South Africa. South Africa is currently chairing the G20. And so in that, and I'm looking at the exact dates when they will be serving as chair. So let me get you that. Recently, there was a meeting with the South African Sherpa for the G20 meetings. So South Africa presidency is from 1st December 2024 to November 2025. And so they had a recent meeting with civil society organizations. It was held at the Ford Foundation. I was invited to attend that meeting. And it was a meeting with the Sherpa of for South Africa, who will be there at the G20 meetings. They're trying to build that conversation with the input from civil society organizations. And if you have a strong relationship with South Africa, it's a good time to start, because there were discussions on corruption at that meeting. And so if you have, already maybe schedule a mission visit, because I think they're open to hearing more from civil society organizations as part of their chairmanship of the G20 discussions.
We also have a connection with the Financial Intelligence Center in South Africa. That was one of the presenters at that LSEG was at.
Yes,
also.
yes. And so you're already connected. So make use of that connection. You have to open the door and, this should be brought up at the G20 discussions too, right? When you're talking about trafficking and corruption and so forth. And I'm not to what extent they are considering it, but you have the opportunity to provide that input. And I can forward that information to you, Rosalie, so that, if you have to connect to somebody at the mission, to do that, maybe, and it was this conversation was facilitated by the UN Foundation.
Okay.
And I can also put you in touch with the person from UN Foundation who, I was in touch with. So that
would be great, because I tried to get in touch with the South Africa mission, and it was radio silence for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's with their party speaking.
Uh-huh.
So
I just wanted to This is a really good conversation and I'm really happy, but I also wanted to make sure that I'm respecting everybody's time. Anita, I know that we told you up until 1 o'clock and I don't know if you have anything else going on. So I definitely don't want to take any more of your time. But I see that Jackie has one more question for, I'm assuming Anita. So, Jackie, would you like to make a brief question before we wrap up?
Sure, Anita and I have a lifetime conversation going though, so
No.
it's okay. But I do have concerns when we talk about financing for development, about uh, some kind of uh, the global south and the global north, you know, the disparity between them. Do you find in your negotiations that are going on that there is some kind of blending of their interests?
Uh, uh, so I see if you know about the tax discussions that were happening, it is a G77 that pushed for it, right? And the G77 is a very strong, advocate for much of what the developing countries need, and they are standing ground. So if you sit in these negotiations, you will see that while the developed countries make the statements, the G77 representatives come very strongly at that meeting. So there is a balance in conversations, and the negotiations are tough. They're not easy because these countries developing countries are very serious about the importance of this FFD in some of the work. I mean, in how things are going to turn out for them in the long run, right? And so nobody is being silent on the concerns being raised. We don't know what happens behind the door. What we are seeing is what's in the front, right? And but all the way through, I've been very impressed with the way the developing countries are standing the ground and saying this is what we want to be seen.
Good.
All right.
Important.
Okay. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Anita. Thank you, Jackie, for that question. But really, thank you so much, Anita, for your wealth of knowledge. Like, wow. It's definitely a lot
Honored.
to, yeah. So yes, a round of applause for Anita, please. All right. So again, friendly reminder, we will be sending over those links. Anita's also that we shared throughout the meeting, and also Anita's attachments and the PowerPoint that she shared with us. And also if you all would please consider joining the subcommittee to follow the HLPF with the traffic plans for CSTIP, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. But I'm sure everything will be detailed in the email. But without further ado, well, I'd like to wrap up this meeting and thank you all so much